Welcome back to the very first Texas gubernatorial debate live here from the Edinburgh Conference Room at Renaissance in the Rio Grande Valley. We kick it off right now with the candidate-to-candidate question. General Greg Abbott, you're first.
Senator Davis, do you regret voting for Barack Obama?
Mr. Abbott, what I am working on right now is running for governor of this incredible state and bringing policies forward that will benefit this state. I'm working to make sure that every hardworking Texan, no matter where they start, has an opportunity to go as far as they dream. 30 years ago, I couldn't have imagined that I would have the privilege, when I was a young, single, struggling mother, of sitting on this stage and having the opportunity to ask Texas for its vote to be the next governor. Texas is at a turning point, and that's what's important in this election. Will we create a 21st century future economy that works for all hardworking Texans or just some? I believe that we need a governor who will fight for all hardworking Texans every single day because their future depends on it. And I believe we need a governor who is going to make sure that our children receive a world-class education because our future depends on it.
Senator Davis.
Senator Davis, it's your turn to ask the question.
Mr. Abbott, Judge Dietz has recently ruled against you and in favor of the school children of Texas, ruling that our schools are unconstitutionally underfunded. The only thing right now coming between our children and appropriate funding of their schools today is you. On behalf of the 5 million children of this state, will you agree tonight that you will drop your appeals and allow our schools to be appropriately funded?
Senator Davis, there's actually another thing coming between me and settling that lawsuit, and that is a law that you voted on and helped pass in 2011 that removes from the Attorney General the ability to settle lawsuits just like this. But it's important to understand that what I want to do is focus on creating, as governor, a better education system in this state. It's time that we put our partisan differences aside when it comes to building a better future for the next generation. What I'm focused on is not a school system that was constructed in part in the last century. What I'm focused on is building a better education system for the next generation. My goal as governor is to work toward elevating the Texas education system to be ranked #1 in the nation.
Mr. Abbott, attorney generals around this country have stood up against their legislatures when they believe that they are wrong.
To the rules
and what you are doing,
I appreciate you wanting to interject.
Is wrong.
Senator Davis, we do appreciate it. We know it's a lively discussion. At the end, though, we have our closing statements, and I encourage you to use that time to continue the discussion. These are rules we all agreed upon together. Okay, Carlos, your question?
Senator Davis, if elected, would you push for individuals receiving state assistance like food stamps to be drug tested?
I actually supported a bill that would provide for that in the last legislative session. But I also supported making sure that we put in place mechanisms so that false drug tests do not force people off of food stamps. I also was very sensitive to the fact that children should not be punished by virtue of the fact that they may have a parent who is drug addicted, and therefore worked with the author of that bill to include a provision, if it was the case that a positive drug test was found, for that person to continue to receive their assistance if they would agree to go into a drug treatment program and to receive the help that they need.
General Abbott, your response.
Carlos, I do support that law. Listen, we want to do all we can in the state of Texas to help those in need. Part of what we can do to help those in need is to help them improve their lives. One way to help them improve their lives is if they are relying upon government benefits, we can try to help them deal with and overcome challenges they may have because of drug addiction or other challenges that would have shown up in the testing. And so we look for this to be a win-win situation, helping those who are depending upon government benefits to find a pathway beyond that so they can begin to be contributing to the fabric of the state of Texas.
General Abbott, San Antonio recently voted to raise taxes to create a universal pre-K program. Do you support a statewide pre-K program? If so, how would you fund it?
Well, I do support improving pre-K. I view pre-K as the starting point in our education, and what I have rolled out in the strategy I have is to have the premier pre-K-4 program in the entire country, because I know that if we can begin educating our students at the very beginning, that we will be able to have that solid foundation that students need to build on. So my education system does begin with pre-K-4. And then importantly, Dalila, it builds upon that to ensure that what students learn in pre-K-4 is going to continue in kindergarten, in first grade, second grade, all the way through. But it's essential, Dalila, that what we have in pre-K is not just throwing more money at it, but instead that we structure the most effective program so that students really do have literacy and numeracy skills they can begin to build on.
Senator Davis.
I strongly support quality full-day pre-K for every eligible child in this state. Unlike my opponent, who would pick and choose which children are able to get off to a strong start, I would provide that strong start to every 4-year-old in our state. My opponent has proposed standardized tests for 4-year-olds to demonstrate that they deserve to have pre-K support, picking and choosing those which would receive it and those which wouldn't. Under Mr. Abbott, 4-year-olds in this state can be assured they'd be subject to standardized tests. The only way they'd get around that is if they hire a lobbyist, form a PAC, and donate to the Greg Abbott campaign, because that's how he works.
Thank you. Senator Davis, Governor Rick Perry was indicted for abuse of power. Do you agree with the decision to indict? Please explain.
I cannot presuppose whether I agree with the decision to indict, because I do not know what the grand jury had before them. I do believe that these are serious charges and deserve, obviously, serious consideration. But I won't second guess the justice system. I will trust it to do its work and will abide by whatever that decision is and respect it.
General Abbott, your response?
Ryan, I was not a part of the grand jury, and so I don't have all the facts the grand jury may have had. What I can tell you is that it is bizarre that a governor would be indicted for exercising a veto of a spending measure. The veto authority is a constitutional authority, and I want to ensure that it remains robustly so that when I am governor, I'm able to exercise that veto for what I consider to be inappropriate spending. One of the key roles I will play as governor is to make sure that the state of Texas lives within the confines of a budget. Part of being able to fulfill that role is being able to exercise the constitutional veto power.
Thank you.
General Abbott, the mayor of McAllen says by the end of the year, he expects to spend $500,000 in taxpayer funds for the humanitarian relief efforts related to the influx of immigrants this summer. What would you do to ensure border cities are reimbursed?
Carlos, as we speak, my office is working on a potential lawsuit against the Obama administration where we are putting together all the expenses incurred by the state of Texas. And one proposal that I'm pondering is the possibility of being able to roll into that potential litigation the expenses that have been incurred by McAllen, by the Rio Grande Valley, because these are expenses that should not come out of the pockets of taxpayers in the state of Texas. The reason, Carlos, is because it wasn't McAllen or the Rio Grande Valley that caused this. The reason why this happened is all the president's fault. It's because when the president stood in the Rose Garden in 2012 and cast a message basically telling people that they would be able to come here without any type of enforcement. And so what we need to do is to hold the president and his administration responsible for paying this bill. As we speak, I'm in the process of working on getting that done.
Senator Davis, your response.
As I said earlier, had I been governor at that time, and when I am elected governor, if I have the privilege of serving there, I will call our local communities before the legislature and ask them what it is that they need. I sent a letter to Governor Perry asking him to convene us in a special session and to bring forward not only local law enforcement from our border communities to hear what they needed, but also to hear from our faith-based and charitable organizations to see what it was that we could do for them. It is the case that it is ultimately the federal government's responsibility to secure our border and to pay the costs as a consequence of not securing it. But as a governor, I do believe that the state should step in and
Senator
help
Davis.
communities such as this one.
Thank you.
Senator Davis, what would you do to combat the influence of drug cartels in Texas?
I believe that we must focus our efforts where they belong, on drug trafficking and human trafficking. That is why I supported the surge of DPS officers who have detention and arrest authority here. But I also believe that we need to be just as focused on the economic relationship between Mexico and Texas. We need to be investing more, not less, in the infrastructure that will help to accelerate efficiently the movement of goods between Mexico and Texas. Our economy is dependent upon our relationship with Mexico. And as governor, I will make sure that we work across the border, not only on security, but in continuing to keep that economic relationship strong and vibrant.
General Abbott.
Dalila, I'm the only candidate for governor who has a plan to go after the drug cartels. And I'll tell you in part why. I was in McAllen July a year ago, and I was visiting with a young Latina about college age. And she begged me and pleaded with me to fulfill my promise to secure the border and go after the cartels. Because as she explained, her brother was playing a pickup soccer game here in the Rio Grande Valley and had to play with the son of a cartel member. Children should not be forced to have to make those types of play day decisions. As governor, I will secure our border and go after any drug cartel that tries to harm any Texan.
General Abbott, this question is for you. Valley leaders blame drought conditions and Mexico's non-compliance with the treaty for a water shortage that has forced many of the region's growers to cut back on farming. If elected, how would you ensure Mexico repays its water debt?
Well, Ryan, I've already begun to work on this process. I met with Ambassador Eduardo Medina Mora to visit about it. And we talked about a number of economic-based issues. And let me clarify, he's the ambassador from Mexico to the United States. And we talked about the need for Mexico to fulfill its obligation to provide water to Texas that Texas deserves. And you could tell that he understood because you can see where Mexico is today. They are growing economically, and they know that part of their economic future is tied to the economic future of the state of Texas. I think Mexico wants to be a good partner. I think they want to see economic development flourish on both sides of the border. And just like we worked with the president in 2004 to ensure we got our access to the water from Mexico, I think we can do it again.
Senator Davis, your response.
Drought conditions have cost the Rio Grande Valley millions of dollars. Last year, farmers had to turn under millions of dollars worth of crops as a consequence of that. Ensuring enforcement of the 1944 water treaty with Mexico is absolutely essential. And as governor, I will create the relationship with Mexico that fosters the kind of partnership that will achieve that. But I also won't wait only on Mexico and that water treaty to solve this problem. That's why, as a state senator, I supported and was proud that voters supported a $2 billion water revolving loan fund that will help communities like the Rio Grande Valley to create and grow water resources and conservation efforts to assure that drought does not have the devastating economic impact
Thank you,
it's
Senator.
had.
Carlos?
Senator Davis, the Texas city of West was rocked by a terrible explosion caused by chemicals that were stored there that many residents did not know were stored there. What do you believe the state should do with regard to informing residents of cities if dangerous chemicals are in their midst?
Let's be clear. Right now, the only thing that is coming between Texas families knowing whether dangerous chemicals are being stored near their homes or near their schools or near where they work is Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott, who has shown time and again that he will favor the interests of his insider friends over those of hardworking Texans when he ruled that Texas families no longer have a right to know whether these dangerous chemicals are being stored close to them. This came almost simultaneously with him accepting a $100,000 plus donation from his buddies in the chemistry industry, Koch Industries. When I am governor, I will put hardworking Texans, not insiders, not donors, first.
General Abbott, your response.
Sure, Carlos. There is a law in Texas called the Community Right to Know Law, and people in the state of Texas have the right to gain information like whether or not chemicals are stored in their neighborhood. There's also another law competing with it, and that is the Texas Homeland Security Act. And I applied the Texas Homeland Security Act to ensure that information involving certain chemicals is not disclosed to potential terrorists. Terrorists like Timothy McVeigh, who used the very fertilizing element that blew up the plant in West to blow up a courthouse in Oklahoma City. We've seen the rise of terrorism. I've been involved in prosecuting a terrorist member of ISIS. We need to be very cautious about the information that's provided to terrorists in Texas.
General Abbott, do you think Texas is tough enough on capital punishment?
Are we tough enough on capital punishment? We have probably the toughest capital punishment laws in the nation. And our job in criminal justice is to ensure those who commit the most heinous crimes get the capital punishment they richly deserve. And they deserve it because when you think about what has happened to the victims and the way the victims have been harmed and sometimes struggled before losing their lives, we need to ensure that those who commit these worst of crimes will be punished accordingly. But, Delula, it is essential that we carry out the ultimate punishment in a way that is fair and just and certain.
Senator Davis.
Last session, as a state senator, I voted to expand the enforcement of capital punishment to include other crimes. I do support and will carry out as governor the death penalty. But we also in Texas have the highest number of exonerations of any state because we had not appropriately been using DNA evidence. As governor, I will make sure that we don't have guilty people meeting the ultimate, non-guilty people, meeting the ultimate punishment. Only those where we are sure that this is the person who has committed a heinous crime. In those instances, should the death penalty be carried out.